The heat on August 4, 1892, was not merely a meteorological phenomenon. It was a suffocating physical weight that pressed down upon the mill town of Fall River, Massachusetts. It was the kind of heat that curdles milk and sours tempers. A thick, humid blanket that trapped the smells of industry and the stench of the nearby Taunton River. But inside the modest, claustrophobic house at number 92 2nd Street, the atmosphere was far more oppressive than the weather outside. Within those walls, a pressure cooker of familial resentment, greed, and suppressed rage was about to explode in a violence so singular, so brutal, that it would stain the fabric of American history forever. Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. Tonight, we do not merely recount a ghost story. We are opening the case file on the most infamous unsolved double homicide in American history. To understand why the dead refuse to sleep, we are traveling back to the bloody floorboards of the Borden family home, examining the documented inquests, the autopsy reports, and the chilling, undeniable testimonies of those who have dared to spend the night in the house where Andrew and Abby Borden were hacked to death. This is a true story documented in historical records, and the terror you are about to hear is drawn from the cold, hard reality of what happened when the axe fell. To understand the haunting, one must first understand the living hell that preceded the deaths. The Borden house was a fortress of miserliness. Andrew Borden was a man of significant wealth, a bank president and property owner worth nearly $10 million in today's currency. Yet he forced his family to live in near squalor to save a penny. While his neighbors enjoyed the modern marvels of indoor plumbing and electricity, Andrew refused such luxuries. The house had no hallways on the ground floor, forcing family members to walk through one another's bedrooms to navigate the home, destroying any semblance of privacy. It was a layout designed for conflict, a trap where 4 adults, Andrew, his second wife Abby, and his 2 adult daughters, Emma and Lizzie, circled each other in a grim pantomime of domestic life. Tension had been festering for years. Lizzie and Emma detested their stepmother, Abby, calling her Mrs. Borden to her face and fearing she was after their father's money. In the days leading up to the murders, the entire household had fallen violently ill. While historical speculation has ranged from food poisoning caused by a mutton stew left on the stove for days to intentional poisoning by an enemy, the physical sickness only added to the delirium of the house. They were weak, vomiting, and paranoid. On the morning of the murders, the heat was already rising. Emma was out of town, leaving Lizzie, Andrew, Abby, and the Irish maid, Bridget Sullivan, whom the sisters called Maggie. The timeline that follows is etched in police logs and inquest testimonies, a countdown to atrocity. Andrew left for his business rounds downtown. Bridget was ordered to wash the windows outside, despite her illness. This left Lizzie and Abby alone in the house. According to forensic reconstruction, around 9:30 in the morning, Abby Borden went upstairs to the guest room to make the bed. She was a heavy woman, short and stout. As she smoothed the sheets, she was attacked. The killer did not hesitate. The first blow struck her on the side of the head, cutting just above the ear. She spun around and fell face down on the floor, trapped between the bed and a dressing bureau. She was defenseless. The killer then straddled her back and delivered 18 more blows to the back of her head. The weapon was a hatchet, heavy. The sheer force required to shatter the skull repeatedly suggests a rage that goes beyond simple murder. It was an obliteration. The blood soaked into the carpet, pooling dark and thick in the stifling heat of the guest room. And then, silence. For an hour and a half, the body of Abby Borden lay cooling on the floorboards while the house remained quiet. This is one of the most chilling aspects of the case. The killer waited. They did not flee. They stayed in the house. Perhaps washing up. Perhaps sitting in the stillness, waiting for the patriarch to return. Andrew Borden came home early, thwarted by the heat. He arrived around 10:45. The front door was triple locked, a testament to his paranoia. Bridget Sullivan let him in. As she wrestled with the locks, she swore she heard a laugh coming from the top of the stairs. the very landing where one could look down and see the guest room floor. Lizzie later claimed she was in the kitchen, or the barn, or the yard. Her story changed repeatedly, but Bridget heard that laugh. Andrew, tired and unwell, went into the sitting room to nap on the sofa. He removed his boots and lay down. He was vulnerable. His face turned slightly to the right. He never woke up. The killer entered the room and struck 11 times. One of the blows was so violent, it split his left eyeball in half. His face was rendered unrecognizable, a mask of red ruin. The blood was still wet, the wounds fresh, when the alarm was raised mere minutes later. At 11:15, Lizzie shouted for the maid, "Maggie, come quick! Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." When the police and doctors arrived, they walked into a scene of carnage that defied logic. There was no sign of forced entry. The house was locked tight. Nothing was stolen. And most baffling of all, Lizzie Borden, the primary suspect, did not have a drop of blood on her. In an era before luminol and DNA testing, the lack of visible gore on her clothing was a powerful defense. Yet, witnesses described her demeanor as strangely calm, almost detached. She did not weep. She did not faint. She stood amidst the butchery of her parents, with a steel-spined resolve that unnerved the seasoned officers. The investigation was a disaster of contamination and oversight. Police trampled through the crime scene. The bodies were autopsied on the family dining table. A grotesque violation that saturated the very wood of the house with death. The doctors removed the heads of Andrew and Abby to examine the skull fractures, later bringing the skulls into the courtroom during the trial, causing Lizzie to swoon in a rare display of emotion. The trial of Lizzie Borden became the first true media circus of the United States. The jury, comprised entirely of men, could not conceive that a woman of Lizzie's social standing, a Sunday school teacher, a daughter of a respected businessman, could be capable of such savagery. Despite the fact that she had tried to buy prussic acid, a deadly poison, the day before the murders, and despite the testimony that she was seen burning a blue dress in the kitchen stove days after the crime because it had paint on it, Lizzie lived the rest of her life in Fall River, ostracized and isolated in a grand house on the hill she named Maplecroft. But the house on 2nd Street remained. It stood as a silent monument to the unsolved crime. No one else was ever charged. The case was cold the moment the gavel fell. But the story does not end with the acquittal. In fact, for the Nocturnal Ledger, that is merely where the prologue ends. The violence inflicted within those walls was so extreme, the emotions so potent, that they seem to have permanently scarred the location. Today, the Lizzie Borden House operates as a bed and breakfast and museum. You can sleep in the room where Abby was murdered. You can sit on the sofa where Andrew's face was destroyed. And thousands of guests have reported that they are not alone. We must look at the haunting not as folklore, but as a continuation of the events of 1892. The activity reported in the house is consistent, aggressive, and deeply personal. It is not a replay of residual energy. It is intelligent. Let us begin in the room that belonged to Bridget Sullivan, the maid. Located in the attic, this space is known for its suffocating atmosphere. Guests who stay here often report extreme temperature fluctuations. In the dead of winter, with the heat off, the room will suddenly become unbearably hot, as if the phantom oven from the kitchen below is venting directly into the attic. But it is the feeling of despair that is most documented. Bridget was the one who discovered the bodies, who carried the weight of the secret, who was likely paid off by Lizzie to return to Ireland and never speak of it again. Witnesses in the attic report the sound of pacing back and forth, the restless walk of a woman trapped by a burden she cannot put down. There have been accounts of guests waking up to see a figure standing at the foot of the bed, dressed in maid's clothing, weeping silently. But more disturbing are the interactions with children. The Borden children died young, except for Emma and Lizzie. But there were other children in the extended family. Toys left in the attic are frequently moved. Marbles are heard rolling across the floorboards in the dead of night when no living soul is walking above. It is a playful sound, but in the context of a murder house, it takes on a sinister edge. Moving down to the second floor, to the John Morse guest room, we enter the epicenter of the violence. This is where Abby died. The room is preserved, much as it was. The bed is in the same spot. The dressing bureau is a replica. Guests who sleep here report the sensation of being watched from the corner of the room. The very corner where the killer would have stood to strike the final blows. There is a distinct cold spot that migrates around the bed. Paranormal investigators using thermal imaging cameras have documented inexplicable drops in temperature of 20 degrees or more in seconds. But the most terrifying phenomenon is the bed press. Numerous guests, unconnected to one another, spanning decades of operation, have reported lying in bed and feeling the mattress depress beside them, as if a heavy person has sat down. Some have felt a hand stroke their hair. Others have felt a violent shove. There is a theory among paranormal researchers that Abby is confused. She was attacked from behind. She never saw her killer's face clearly in that moment. Her spirit is said to linger, trying to make the bed, trying to finish the task she started over a century ago. However, there is a darker energy in that room as well. Many women who stay there report feeling an intense, unexplained sadness, while men often feel a sharp pain in their neck or shoulder, mimicking the injuries Abby sustained. Then there is the master bedroom, Andrew's room. This room is often described as having a masculine, authoritative energy. Andrew was a man of control. He dominated his household, even in death. That need for control seems to persist. Guests have reported the heavy sound of booted footsteps ascending the stairs and walking down the hallway, stopping right outside the door. The doorknob has been seen turning on its own. One of the most chilling pieces of documented evidence comes from a police officer who stayed at the B&B on a dare. A skeptic, he brought no equipment, just his own senses. In the middle of the night, he was woken by the sound of a woman crying. It wasn't a soft weep. It was a guttural, terrified sobbing coming from the floorboards near the wall. He turned on the light, and the sound ceased instantly. When he turned the light off, the crying returned, this time accompanied by a whisper that he swore said, "Please, no." He checked out at 3 a.m, refusing to return. The ground floor, specifically the sitting room where Andrew died, is perhaps the most spiritually heavy area of the house. This is where the autopsy was performed. Picture the scene. The dining table extended, the windows covered to block the prying eyes of the thousands of spectators gathering outside. The doctor sawing through bone in the sweltering August heat. The trauma imprinted on this room is palpable. Visitors often report the smell of flowers, specifically lilies and carnations, wafting through the room when no flowers are present. This is believed to be the scent of the funeral flowers, a sensory echo of the days following the murders. But more aggressive activity occurs here too. Photographs taken in the sitting room often reveal anomalies, shadow figures standing in the doorway, or strange mists hovering over the sofa. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, is a staple of paranormal investigation, and the Borden House is a goldmine for such evidence. During an investigation conducted by a renowned paranormal team, a recorder left in the sitting room captured a voice clearly saying, "I didn't do it." Was this Lizzie? Or was it someone else? Another recording, captured near the basement door, features a growling voice saying, "Get out." The basement itself is a place of dread. It is where the police found the hatchet head, devoid of a handle, covered in ashes, the suspected murder weapon. The handle had been broken off, presumably because it was bloodstained. The basement is dark, with a dirt floor in parts, and the original wash kettle where Lizzie burned her dress is still there. People have reported being scratched in the basement, 3 distinct red welts appearing on arms or backs, burning like fire. This type of physical aggression is rare in hauntings and usually points to a demonic or negative entity rather than a human spirit. Some theorize that the sheer amount of negative energy generated by the hatred in the house has birthed something darker than the ghosts of the Bordens. We must also consider the psychological horror endured by the real victims, not just the murdered parents, but those who lived. Bridget Sullivan, the maid, testified at the trial, and then vanished into obscurity. But before she died in Montana years later, she allegedly confessed to her sister that she had changed her testimony to protect Lizzie. Imagine the terror of living in that house, knowing a double murderer was sleeping just a few rooms away. Imagine the silence of that breakfast table in the days leading up to the slaughter. The house today stands as a paradox. It is a tourist attraction, yes, people buy bobbleheads and keychains. But when the sun goes down, and the staff leaves, and the doors are locked for the night, the veneer of tourism fades away. You are left in a house that was built in 1845, with no air conditioning, creaking floors. Eyewitness testimony from a woman named Sarah, who stayed in the house in 2023, highlights the invasive nature of the haunting. She reported that while she was washing her face in the bathroom, she felt a finger trace the line of her spine. She spun around, dripping wet, to find the bathroom empty. But on the mirror, in the condensation, was a small, perfect handprint. It was too small to be hers. It was the size of a child's hand, or perhaps the size of a petite woman's hand. Another guest, a man named David, reported a time-slip experience. He woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window. Instead of the modern street lights and paved roads of Fall River, he claimed to see a dirt road and a horse-drawn carriage waiting outside. He blinked, and the modern world returned. Was this a hallucination brought on by the atmosphere, or does the house occasionally revert to the time of its greatest trauma? The scientific community, of course, offers explanations. They speak of infrasound caused by old pipes, creating feelings of dread. They talk about the power of suggestion. If you go to a murder house expecting to be scared, your brain will interpret every creak as a footstep. They mention electromagnetic fields from old wiring causing hallucinations. But science cannot explain the shared nightmares. There is a phenomenon at the Borden House where guests in different rooms, who have not spoken to each other, report having the exact same dream on the same night. In this dream, they are lying on the floor, unable to move, looking up at a figure holding a weapon. The figure's face is always blurred, but the dress is blue. This shared psychic experience suggests that the house acts as a transmitter, broadcasting the memory of the murder into the subconscious of those who sleep there. The enduring mystery of the Borden case is what fuels the nocturnal ledger. If Lizzie was innocent, as the jury decided, then a maniac walked into the house in broad daylight, killed 2 people without leaving a trace, and vanished. If she was guilty, then a Sunday school teacher hacked her father and stepmother to pieces and got away with it. Both possibilities are terrifying. But there is a third possibility, one that the spirits seem to whisper. Perhaps it was a conspiracy. Perhaps Bridget the maid was involved. Perhaps there was an illegitimate son, as some wild theories suggest. The spirits in the house seem restless because the truth was never written down. It was washed away with the blood, burned in the stove, and buried in the Oak Grove Cemetery. The house is a time capsule of Victorian repression. The very walls seem to vibrate with the things that were left unsaid. The hatred Lizzie felt for Abby did not dissipate with death. It saturated the plaster and the timber. If you ever find yourself in Fall River, standing before the dark green structure at 92 2nd Street, looking up at the shuttered windows, remember this. You are not looking at a house. You are looking at a crime scene that never closed. You are looking at a purgatory where Andrew Borden still tries to take his nap, where Abby Borden still wonders why the girl she helped raise hates her so much. And where Lizzie, well, Lizzie is everywhere. Some say she never left. They say that when the tour guides tell her story, she is listening, correcting them from the shadows. They say that the cold draft you feel on the back of your neck is her, checking to see if you are friend or foe. The Lizzie Borden House remains one of the most haunted locations in America, not because of jump scares or movie monsters, but because the horror is human. It is the horror of a family destroying itself. It is the horror of a hot August morning where the veneer of civilization cracked and something primal and bloody crawled out. As you lay your head down tonight, in the safety of your own home, listen to the settling of the house. Listen to the creaks in the floorboards. And be thankful that the footsteps you hear are only the house cooling down, and not the heavy, deliberate tread of a woman with an axe, climbing the stairs to say goodnight. This has been an entry in the Nocturnal Ledger. The past is never truly dead. It is just waiting in the dark for you to open the door. Good night.